Welcome back. I'm glad you're still with us here on Morning at NTV. It's the Kickstarter, and 20 minutes to the top of the hour of 8 o'clock is when we are getting underway. I have a set of guests who will be helping us understand what the political landscape is and how it's going to take shape ahead of the much anticipated 2026 general election. There's a lot that is going on. There is taking up of positions and vantage points in order to be able to basically, as many opposition figures have said over the years, dislodge the national resistance movement. Can that happen? Will it happen? Today we shall have perspective that is neutral from a historian, and that is very, very critical. I have Semuju Ibrahim Nganda, Honorable MP for Kira Municipality. He's also spokesperson of PPF. Many thanks for making it this morning. PFF. My sincere apologies for that. In the dynamics and the crosshairs of broadcasting, many times acronyms get misplaced, but PFF it is. Thanks for making time. We're also joined by Dr. Robert Ojiambo, Head of History Department at Chambogo University. Many thanks for making it to Morning at NTV.
Good morning.
We also have Sarah Birete, Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance. Many thanks for making time again.
Thank you, and good morning, viewers.
Great. I made mention of a neutral perspective, that is in light of Dr. Robert Ojiambo, not because of something that happens on a daily. We're glad to have you on board. Let's begin with you as Semuju Nganda prepares to take us through what the PFF is up to in light of statements yesterday, including the fact that we should look out for an address from Kizza Besigye from prison. How that is going to happen, we all don't know. What do you make of the state of affairs as the country prepares for the general election in 2026, given the high theatrics, the drama in the nominations that have been going on? Dr. Ojiambo.
Yeah, thank you so much. As I normally say, politics, just like any other life, is like how a computer operates. What you feed in is what you get out as results. And I, for one, do not see anything much very different that is going to happen, because you predict from what has been happening for the 5 or so elections that we have had, and how the government in power has presented itself and organized, determines a lot of things. In Uganda, the government, first of all, does not accept a competition. They think it is a fight. The government refers to anybody who is not for them as an enemy. And that's why you people of the media have even now stopped calling political parties by their names. You call them opposition, all of them. And the opposition in the context of Uganda looks like a set of criminals who have somehow refused to abide with what is happening in the country, and for that matter they have to be treated as such. So you find the state against them, all the state apparatus is against them. The talk on in the political circles, look at them as saboteurs who are failing things to happen. And because of that, you create some sort of anarchy where you don't create a very conducive situation for people to campaign and do things. When you look at the political parties themselves, because of the circumstances that they have been put in, they are also just waiting for a time to go for election, and therefore the political parties become I normally sometimes call them general purpose vehicles. General purpose vehicles to try and see how somebody can get to a post of Lord Mayor or get to a post of MP and so on. So at the end of the day, the citizens are almost confused. The citizens are confused. Do you support the sort of saboteurs who are being alleged to be stopping government programs, or sometimes are accused for having not done anything when they don't control a budget, they don't control any state resources, they themselves, you don't know even, maybe some of you will tell us where they get money, you wonder. So you find that political parties are not allowed to do what an ideal political party would do. An ideal political party would be to come and mobilize support to get power or to get leadership if it is in other positions. So in most cases, the political parties are fighting with the state. There is a running battle almost throughout, and because of that, political parties don't operate, including the national resistance movement, which is in power, does not operate like a political party. It instead operates like a subsection of the state. In fact, for them, they believe that they are the state, so the army is for them, the police is for them. The president speaks as if they bought shares in the republic called Uganda. So because of that, at the end of the day, in January, you are not going to see a very good election. There is going to be selection in a few places, and if some MPs like Semju are lucky, they win, and they are used as a bait that if there is rigging, if there is other problems, how come that Semju has won? So that is the biggest problem. Unfortunately, it's not only in Uganda here. It is an African problem. When you go to Kenya, it is the same problem. When you go to Tanzania right now, the leading opposition leader is in prison, and Chadema has been banned from participating in election. And the reason why they were banned from participating in election is because they were saying if there is no reform, there is no election. So that's why I see, maybe that's why the same Jews now are not talking about reform. They are quiet. Maybe they are also fearing that what happened to the Chademas of this world may happen to them. Okay. So I think if you were alive during the last election in 2021 and you saw what happened, it needed a lot of corrections in a number of things, and that was even the recommendation that was made in the court. Although the petitioner lost, but there were recommendations on reforms. We needed the recommendations on the dealing of the army and the elections, police and election. We needed to know how these people are funded. It is not clear. Recently, they just passed a law on how they have been getting money. Now I wonder, the likes of PFF, how do they get funded? It is not known. Great. So at the end of the day, we are going to have, although I was discussing with the Semju before we came here, that there is going to be a continuous anarchy like we had in the last election, and he doesn't think so. Me, I think so. I can just give you a small picture. In the primaries alone, we have so far lost, the ones I know, 3 people. 3 people have died. One in Zimbabwe, the support of Sechikubo, and on this Saturday, 2 people died when they were nominating candidate Yoweri Museveni. 2 people died, killed by Gari Yamuzei. So if a Gari Yamuzei alone on one day can kill 2 people, now what about when all the brutalities are unleashed in the next year? So I don't really see a lot of hope. there is going to be a continuation of anarchy unless something happens. Unless something happens.
That's a very disturbing perspective and look at what is happening on the political scene. But I do believe there is optimism and hope on the part of the PFF and the likes of Semuji Uganda. And for the entirety of the show, the spotlight will shine very brightly on PFF as you roll out. Do you share Dr. Ojambo's seeming pessimism, so to speak? What is going to change in light of your new general purpose vehicle?
You see, my knowledge of Museveni, he works differently. When the Constitution was amended to remove the age limit in 2017, because he had not prepared for that fight in Parliament, we saw SFC walking from his office. We were ready, by the way, that day even to die. I was the first to be captured.
You were ready to die?
We were ready to die. Because, I mean, when you see SFC walking into Parliament, what else do you expect? We went in knowing that anything was possible. They nearly killed me. I was taken to Nagarama police. The first thing was to go to St. Agnes for treatment. Even them, they couldn't put me in a police cell. We were being strangled by SFC. Because I was the first, I saw everybody being brought. Gerard Karuhanga was nearly dying. Mitiana, Zake, they brought him when he was unconscious. We are the ones now pleading. We are prisoners, but pleading with the police to at least help Zake, who was in a very bad shape. The coffee bill, the debate, because I've said Museveni did not prepare for that fight. Now he prepared. They corrected all journalists, locked them in the conference hall at Parliament, switched off rights.
In the basement?
In the basement. Switched off rights and started arresting MPs one by one, because he didn't want the case of the Tojikwatako. I don't think Museveni is going to allow any campaign. You may go into this campaign and those who disturb him, you're all in your houses locked up there. Because Museveni has maintained a posture which he wants the international community to see of someone who organizes the election, and the elections are free and fair. At least some propaganda can be done around that. He did prepare for Bobi Wine in the last elections. So Bobi Wine went around and Museveni discovered that, because one thing that frightens Museveni is to see the mass. The moment you have a following and he sees people have filled the road, he has employed and sacked people on the basis of covering his rallies. If you read on Apito's book, if he doesn't have photographs of a big crowd, if you work with his PR, you have no job. So having realized that the opposition historically will attract bigger crowds, because I remember 2001 elections, I just left the university and Museveni invited us to a press conference. But the argument in the press conference was that he had a big, actually 96, that he had a bigger crowd than Semokerere. He even brought a blackboard and started drawing, measuring the length of Kololo, and he said at that time that he had 2 million people in Kololo, more than Semogere. Because at that time there was a bit of sanity. Museveni nominated, he went for a rally at Kololo. Semogere nominated, he went for a rally at Kololo. But the crowd of Semogere looked bigger than the one of Museveni. So he called a press conference to say mine was bigger. And there was a blackboard, he started drawing, he says this is a meter. So one thing that frightens Museveni is crowds. I'm not sure he's going to allow that. Having gone around PDM, so we must find another way, those of us who are competing with Museveni. As far as we are concerned, on Tuesday we will formally inaugurate our party, present ourselves afresh, because we presented ourselves before to the public. and make suggestions that you can publicly make, and then we keep those that we will be implementing internally. I face the same question even in the constituents. What are you guys going to do different? What are you going to do that you've not done before? And I keep telling the people in the Chira that I see you every day waking up to go to town to make money. So you mean when you don't get the following day, you don't return? So this fight is a fight to exist. It's not we don't have the options. We have to continue battering. But my suspicion, and I don't agree entirely with you that things are going to be the same. Things have actually changed. You now have M7 very old, and old people are managed. His family, his son, and the others we don't know are managing their old father. They are going to be more active. In the past, M7 used to be in charge. He would be the one to deploy. He will say, now this one leave. But at the moment, something that has happened to all your historians, to all the old presidents, from Kamuzu Banda to everybody, the moment they grow old, they are managed. They are like a project. So you're going to see more of brutality from Jati, from SFC, commanded by Mohoz, who thinks now is managing his father and their estate. And Museveni, I have told people in my constituency, Museveni is just a person of a bad heart, but he's intelligent. His son is not. And I want to emphasize that. Because Museveni will never go to a public platform to celebrate torture. He will actually deny. But the son will torture you as he celebrates on social media that I am torturing this one. So you now have people who have no shame, and they are the ones in charge. I mean, these things you saw in Kawempe, Museveni would do them differently. He will beat you either in your house or at night. In fact, when we are protesting with the Besigye, the time I have been with him, the moment you see them beating journalists, you know you will follow. The first thing is to clear the media. When you see the media being cleared, I used to move with Rukwago. Then you take a decision whether you stay in and get beaten or you run away. But Mohoz will beat you before cameras, and he will celebrate and he will congratulate those who are beating. That's what's going to be the difference in these elections. That it will take people of very strong spine to say, let me go in and get killed. But otherwise the killing will happen, not because, first they are not going to allow rallies. Very soon, these bombs that you saw around, I have already been alerted that there will be guidelines for fighting urban terrorism. So there will be restrictions, and they will tell you because of security. And then you wait for the Electoral Commission, this one of Justice Byabakam. They will just announce, same way we had the COVID campaign. Now they will tell you, no rallies, no this, no this. And then if you have one rally, like when Chagulanyi was in Karangara, he was kidnapped, thrown in a helicopter, driven home, and you under house arrest. I think we are going to see more of that than allowing rallies and then you go to break those rallies up. So those of us who have been involved in this, we are prepared, but also internally discussing how to approach these elections, ones that we've not seen before. Because in the past, you are competing with Museveni, who had some energy. Now the energy is gone. So he must campaign alone, and then after his campaigns, which is about to finish, restrictions. And because I think at that time, Museveni wants to go and rest a bit. Because his age, you can't go around the country twice in 4 months.
You seem to be suggesting that the president's current tour that is touted or propped as PDM tours is actually,
you see, PDM, let me tell you, PDM is a joke. The constituency I represent has 459,000 people, 500,000 people. Those who have benefited from PDM are 0.5%. So if you are saying, you come to Chiranda Adwesera to speak about something that has benefited 0.5%, and these figures are in the Population and Housing Census report, but they want to throw it in people's faces as if it is a game changer. I have told you, in my constituency, the beneficiary is 0.5%. Because we have 130,000 homesteads, just about 800 have benefited. And these are their figures. But Museveni will come to Chira that he has come to address PDM.
Okay. Let's not go into the PDM mainstream.
It's just a joke.
Hearing Ssemuju and Dr. Ojiambo speak about the realities on the ground, I'm sure there is nothing much that is going to change apart from increase in violence, a certain brand of violence that, if Ssemuju's words are anything to go
I mean,
by,
you saw it. You sorry to disturb. You saw
redefine the word itself.
You saw what happened in Kampala on Saturday.
What's your take on these things?
I think there will be change, but change for the worst.
Wow.
Yes. We have done scenario mapping as a civil society organizations working on democracy generally and elections as part of democracy. The trends show that there will be increased violence, there will be excessive impunity, especially coming from the UPDF, and there will be increased timidness of the Electoral Commission. So Electoral Commission will not assert itself in fear of annoying anybody exercising impunity. And there will be increased apathy of the voters, of course increased mistrust in electoral management generally, and we have had so far little or no voter education. So this deep public skepticism about elections will also lead to low turnout, but also create a gap for massive rigging. This is how the 2026 elections read like in our scenario mapping. There is an opportunity though of many young actors in all parties, NRM, NUP, PFF, many young and energetic actors that could push back on some of these red flags that we are already mapping out, but also because of what is happening in the international community. Iran, Israel, Gaza conflict, attention on DRC and the mineral grab, challenges with Iran and the possible flip in oil prices as well as other items. We are likely to have little or no attention from the international community on these elections. And of course the new style of the US administration. So there is a little attention, plus the far-right rise in European countries. There is a little attention on democracy generally on the international scale. So this will give an opportunity to people who exercise impunity to know that maybe there are no repercussions. And unless these trends change, we are likely to have a more worse election than what we have been having as a country.
Okay. Dr. Ojiambo and Honorable Ssemuju Nganda, this is a question for the two of you, and Mr. Ojiambo, you will go first. For many years, the opposition has sought to dislodge the National Resistance Movement and failed. But every time an election comes up, we see further disintegration, breakups, and formation of new fronts, which ideally favors the NRM, because the more disintegrated you are as the opposition, the advantages go to the ruling party that seems to stay in a single block. Shouldn't the strategy change? What makes it so hard for our politicians in the opposition to come together into a block? You talked about, I don't know whether I got you right, the power struggle. Everyone wants it for themselves. Shouldn't that change? And if it must, how can we reach a point where political party leaders don't see themselves as the only ones that must lead if they are to come together?
Yeah, here maybe we need to borrow from history of independence struggles in these African countries. When you look at these independence struggles, African countries were mainly favored by the circumstances of that day.
Okay.
They were not favored by masses, people coming together. I can assure you there are people in Kapela Biong or in different parts of the country who did not know that even there was a struggle for independence in Kampala here. And they didn't even know that the Musazis existed. They had never heard about them. But the conditions of the day enabled them. And that's why I keep telling people that the colonialists was a little bit better than the dictators in Africa. The colonialists, the British, the French were slightly better because for them, they were colonialists who wanted to control hegemony, but they gave chance to other players to do. You could imagine Musazi being deported to the UK, and he has lawyers who are defending him, who are colonialists themselves, and they defend him and they argue until the man is returned to Uganda, including the Kabaka. You may think that the Kabaka maybe was because of Twagala Kabaka Bufatufe what brought them back, but they had people in the. If you read the Hansard of the British during that time, they were arguing for the Kabaka to be returned back to Uganda. So the circumstances of the day are the ones which helped independence, be it in Ghana, be it in Kenya, be it everywhere, with the exception of South Africa. But even South Africa, de Klerk had to come and give a conducive environment. So in Uganda, I don't think you need a coalition of political parties for change to take place. You need an environmental change, because look at the elections that we have had. If you are a man of statistics, you will discover that opposition has always gotten the same number of votes. Let's assume that they are not rigged and what have you. So whether
opposition has no capacity to rig,
whether it is
most of the time.
No, we have heard that they also rig. The president has said that they rigged his 2 million votes. And if the president is somebody to believe, then you cannot rubbish that.
Did he adduce evidence?
That he was going to adduce. We are waiting for that evidence. So I just want to tell you, if you saw the people who supported Semo Gerere in 1996, it looked like those are the guys who, when Besigye came, they just shifted. And so on until last year, I mean the last election, that's where the demographies changed. So much so that NUP only won in the central region and the parts of Busoga. But if you check the other elections, you would see that Besigye was supported by North, East, and a few votes from Buganda here. His place, he performed very poorly. Now, in the next coming election, you are going to see almost the same thing. You are going to see Buganda and Busoga, because it has started already appearing. So, tell me which magic, if these people came together, which magic are they going to turn Western, Northern, which is tilting now to yellow, and Eastern, which is tilting to yellow. Eastern, I mean Teso, mainly that Teso area.
Bukit.
And Ankole, or Western, which has always been yellow for them. Yellow is their party. Whether it is doing what or what, they don't care. So scientifically, you don't see what that coalition would bring. The most important thing would be for us to, or the actors, to struggle for change of environment, to make sure that, one, parties are left to campaign and do their mobilization wherever they are. Two, we reduce state interference into the day of election, because that day of election matters a lot. You can campaign all this period, but the day of election and so on. So I am not one of the people who think that political parties, to cause change here, they must unite. Of course, if they united, they would create some synergy and so on. But I want to imagine that the circumstances that they are working in, even if they united, even sometimes you may think that if they united, there is even to handle. So if they are operating in small silos, as you deal with the norm, if PFF would also become stronger and disturb them, so you have a number of areas to deploy police than to go and catch them in one place. Okay. So I really think that yes, they need to unite, but that would be very difficult in Africa, because you know, unlike other places in Europe and America, where majority of the politicians go to serve or go to for the name of I want to serve my people. In Africa, majority of the politicians are job seekers. They are seeking for a job, and therefore you don't tell them. Like, somebody feels very good when he's the president of the party, even when he doesn't know what a party does.
Interesting there. Honorable Samojonganda, we have PFF, we have the Democratic Front, we have the Forum for Democratic Change, we have the Democratic Party, we have the Uganda People's Congress, we have JEMA, we have ANT, and we have the National Unity Platform. To an outsider, if you mention these parties and they've been in Uganda for, say, 3 months, they wouldn't stake an ideology to any of them, as in, this is what I identify NOP with, this is what I identify FDC with, this is what I identify PFF with. There is a deficit, especially when it comes to ideology. Now, when it comes to seeking political power, it seems there is a general agreement that President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni and the NRA must be dislodged. The how of it is where you totally don't agree as politicians within the opposition. There is always that hope, and a coalition is a hard thing to come by. An alliance is also a hard one. I know there are efforts by the DF, where the DF is, that an alliance can happen, but it's a difficult one. Where is the problem? Why can't, and I'm asking a man who comes from a party that has dislodged itself from another party.
1980, Museveni went to the world to fight. He was not the only fighting group. Nkwanga was here operating in Igawa. The former Minister of Energy, the one who was killed, Kaira, was operating in the areas of Rubaga. Moses Ali was in a... Being many doesn't stop you from removing a government. In fact, if you are saying yourself properly, you will collectively and individually be weakening that government. For me, that doesn't bother me. I met South Sudan, the rebels, when they were fighting at Bashir. There was a meeting organized in Uganda to try to unite them. I went to cover that meeting as a journalist in NTV. There were more than 17 fighting groups. When Idi Amin was removed, you remember the Mosh conference in Tanzania. The groups that were there were also more than 10. So being many doesn't stop you from removing a government. The only problem is that winning an election in Uganda doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be announced a winner. You have had ourselves, also people in government. Tinyefuza said 2006 that WSG actually won the elections. At that time he was coordinator of security. But Museveni will still declare himself. You see, elections are very difficult. I spoke to a colleague of mine. He comes from Mbarara. His name, I will not say who he is. And he told me, these people that you guys think are villagers, when left free, they can shock you. He told me people in my area started voting until, so when started declaring results, so they had stopped some declarations. So even me, I didn't know. I was shocked. So you go to a polling station, Bobo has 290, Museveni has 310 in a rural Ankole.
A difference of only 20.
Yeah, he said around 5 there, so those sort of declarations stopped. I was born in a village. In my village, Museveni loses elections. Nobody does campaign there. But he has never won there. All of us are not there. So when you leave the population free, it is not impossible that Museveni can be defeated. The only trouble is that even when you defeat him, I remember in 2001, he summoned Aziz Kasuja and Albert Chitariko, who were heading elections in Nakasero, and started claiming that you were cheating him. So when they started announcing results that were not in his favor, he summoned the Electoral Commission past midnight to tell them you are rigging elections. I have intelligence reports. He threw files at them and then walked away. I was covering the declaration of results here. He actually, and you don't know how Kasuja celebrated after declaring Museveni. He said, "Oh, we have finished." I was here when they started announcing results, and the one of March in the East, you had more votes than registered voters. So it's not that Museveni has not been defeated. It is because he controls all the institutions that work around the election. That year, 2001, the Mayombos were operating a Tare Center. They received the results ahead of the Electoral Commission and changed where they wanted to change, and then went ahead and declared. The parties working together is a good idea. Sometimes it may not happen. I know as PFF, even when we went to Luzira last week to meet Dr. Resich, he said you must be very careful. The conflicts within and between the parties, some of them are constructed by the state. And said keep talking to each other, keep talking to each other. It's not that everybody who is in politics is looking for a job. Maybe some of us are. Muntu doesn't want to stand for a parliamentary seat. One time, Tumukunde was saying, why don't all these big people go and Besigye doesn't want to become an MP. So there are people who genuinely are pursuing change of power, but there are also those of us who see in this an opportunity to go and become an MP, and they give you a good salary. So it's a cocktail. All of us are there. But that doesn't stop. Even someone who is looking for a job, by the way, he can do a lot of work for you, as long as you have aligned him properly and you have assigned him properly. For me, it doesn't bother me. Someone looking for a job, if you tell him go and mobilize against Museveni in this area and he does it, he can get both. He can get the job, but also does mobilization for you.
Okay, thank you, Honorable, for that submission. Very light-hearted indeed. I hope you are on the part that is not necessarily looking for a job. We shall go for a break. When we return, this conversation does continue as we try to understand exactly how the electoral landscape will shape out ahead of the 2026 general election. Stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. The discussion is very, very vibrant here as we were taking that break. Thank you very much for staying with us. It's the Kickstarter, of course, and we're trying to map out what's the situation or the realities of the ground ahead of the general election. Honorable Sabuju, you said there was a submission that you were making very lastly before we went into the break.
Yes, the point I wanted to make is that the population itself is an opposition to Museveni. You can actually compromise all of us. Museveni can compromise all of us.
Ugandans.
That will only deny
the leaders.
The leaders, yeah.
And I told one time Tango Doi, we were on the TV, and I told him, you see, you are constructing something that you will regret. You can compromise all the leaders, but that population of the young people, the moment it explodes without leadership, anyone will become a leader.
Yeah.
That is right.
So, if anyone thinks that if party is split, if the opposition is compromised, that's the end of the game, we are in for problems as a country. I mean, people didn't know where Bobo Wine came from. You will get someone worse. because today you are containing Bob Wine. Maybe you will have Sobi as a lead. One day you can wake up with these gangs that you have seen on the street beating people being hired by NRM.
Soldier chap.
One of them might become a leader. Because in my constituency, whether you have compromised leaders or not, the opposition against Museveni continues to grow. In the last election, Museveni was getting 7% of all the total votes. The NRM candidate at the parliamentary level became third for the first time. But people are even laughing at NRM. That's why in the Kawempe by-election, what troubled Museveni most in all his internal meetings was that if he doesn't do anything, people will stop seeking NRM sponsorship in some areas. And that's why he was seeking to reverse the elections in Kawempe. That's why he went to court. He said if we don't do something, people will stop seeking NRM sponsorship. He sees it. Museveni, as I said, is intelligent. He's just a bad-hearted person. So he sees the trend. So when you see him now resorting to basement using his son, it is not because Museveni doesn't know what is going on. So I fear for Uganda that one time you can wake up and you are in the hands of those who were terrorizing people in Kampala, but this time hired by NRM. Anyone, the moment you compromise leadership, you will have someone least expected rising up and becoming a leader.
Sarah, when you look at, let me just tilt or rather transition very briefly from the aspect that there could be deficits in leaders or people who can take the parties forward in case the current leaders are compromised, which is happening very rampantly if some of the developments are anything to go by. Within the political parties themselves, there's something that is going on, and I describe it as strangulation of democracy. You want to show the country that maybe the democratic credentials of the NRM are lacking, but within the parties themselves, there is a lot of hand-picking. Hand-picking which is anchored on the notion that there could be candidates that are not popular and can't win any party position in order to create the numbers in parliament or even local government positions. This hand-picking is evident, or accusations we've had within the National Unity Platform. NRM grapples with that on every election where people are told to step aside for another, and I don't know whether UPFF is struggling with that. I don't know whether you're waiting for Kizza Besigye to be released so that he can be the one to lead the party. I don't know why Semuju is not putting himself out for that position.
The party. Our party is led by
Lukwago.
In fact, at the moment it's Wafula Ogutu.
At the moment,
yes.
So you see the kind of I don't know whether it's a lack of clarity on who should be leading, and then there is what appears like an apparent weight for Kizza Besigye.
There is a committee of founders, and Wafula is the chairman. On Tuesday next week, July 8th, we are going through an internal process to announce interim leaders, and then the leaders, as they are in our constitution, will be elected through a process. Because we have just been registered, so we'll have interim leaders announced, and Besigye is not one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, but you know, the democracy is not exercised through one method. Democracy is defined as a decision of the majority, while respecting the rights of the minority. So if a party chooses consensus as a method for choosing flag bearers, consensus means majority have agreed, if not all. Still it will be democracy. At times we crucify parties in the opposition for wrong reasons, without being mindful of the structural problems. How many parties have funds to do delegates conference, to do primaries countryside, in the whole country? How many? because conducting primaries in the whole country is like a national election. How many parties have that money?
I even think
with the
if NRM
limitations
was left on its own, manage
without the state.
without the state.
Yes, it is very expensive. So without knowing why a party has taken such a decision, we sit and crucify them. They are not democratic. If you call candidates for a particular seat in a room and say our assessment shows these strengths, these weaknesses, but we want you to agree. I've seen, I think, two groups in NUP, setting off, saying we have agreed. This is a better candidate and we shall support the candidate. In NRM yesterday, I saw, people had come to pick the forms for chairmanship of the party being bounced off. Dr. Tango Doi Kerem, that he doesn't have forms to give after opening the space. And he's limiting them to receive forms and return them within a matter of hours. If he gives them out, that is on Friday. Because if you've opened the seat, if it was not ring-fenced, how can you claim that you don't have forms? And why did you receive the other people's money? Will you refund it at the end of the day if they pull out? So I think that seat is ring-fenced. And then NRM claims to be a mass party, claims to be democratic. So, but the opposition parties that are struggling, one with the toxic environment. You might also say we can fundraise resources to run primaries, but what if the state bangles those primaries? Do you have control over the toxic environment you work in? So they must assess the financial, but also the operating environment. And the candidates, some of these candidates are planted. So if I have information that this candidate is planted.
We had a by-election in Karamoja. After nominating a lady, the next day she was at a rally with Museveni in another district and she said, I am withdrawing.
Yes. Some of these...
She defected.
Yeah.
No, but the Electoral Commission said once you are admitted by the party, you cannot withdraw. But she went with Museveni and announced that it happened in Chirura.
So some of these candidates are planted and the parties might know. Do you go ahead to hand over your flag? So this is information that the public might not know. But I believe that strategists in these parties have good reasons to choose the method they go by, especially given the toxic environment that we operate in.
As a historian, Dr. Jambo, and an observer, shouldn't political parties, especially within the opposition, first pivot from regime change? Because regime change, if it is seen as the front factor, it will be dealt with effectively by all manner of strategy, including what Semuju says, the regime, or rather the state or NRM buying of some people. Shouldn't political parties say, if 2026 cannot deliver what we want, the next election can? Let's work on building the consensus that is required, but most importantly, making sure that we entrench within the population the idea of looking at parties from ideological point of view on what they push and how, and on what, for example, it could be agriculture, it could be healthcare, because as a country and as a people, we are desperate to know who, for example, wants a healthcare system for us, who wants an agricultural bank to help the rural poor, who wants a system of education that is anchored on free services. We don't know that, and we cannot actually look at one political party and say, oh, these guys are for that, these guys are. All we see is Museveni must go, and when Museveni realizes that is the factor, then he can buy them into either submission or being spies, so to speak.
You see, looking at other environments elsewhere, I think has spoiled some of us who speak the Queen's language. or the
Interesting
king,
there.
now the king,
Now the king.
the king's language.
Yeah.
That would work in a system where you have a government and where you have a state and where you have all those apparatus of the state functioning
Properly.
in Africa. Unfortunately, what the colonialists left us here was the syndrome of presidentialism, where the president is only number 2 to God in most of these African countries. And when you look at the constitutions, when you look at the structures, it gives him a lot of powers. So there is nothing talking about agriculture, nothing talking about health, nothing talking about education, nothing talking about anything without that title of a president. For the case of Uganda, the president is even the Minister of Finance. In fact, Kasaija only performs that duty on his behalf. He's the one who gives him that duty. The ministers of agriculture and what have you are elected by the presidents or the president. And for that matter, there is no government in Africa without a president. I'll just give you an example. Look at Magufuli in Tanzania when he was a president. Tanzania was different. Everybody was admiring that. Can you lend us that man for a few? I saw Ugandans requesting that they should lend us that man for a few months here. Now with the Samia, Tanzania has gone back to crying. The port is being sold. In fact, it has already been sold. The minerals have gone back where they were going. The dictatorship in the country is just too bad. Of course, it was started by Magufuli, but this one is blatant now. It does not have any statecraft to do the work without knowing. So that's why people who, in fact, if you went to the people and you're telling them that, you see, for us, we don't want that presidency, but we are going to change for you agriculture. They say this man must be a con man. How do you tell us? Because in Uganda, people think that the country belongs to the president. You talk to the local people, they will ask you, but now, you man, why are you disturbing the president? In places where it's very popular. In places where it's not popular, the people want to see, how are you going to dislodge this presidency? And we also have something. And for that matter, that approach of doing things can work very well in Britain, can work very well in Denmark, can work very well in the US, because you saw in the US, the president is not a very powerful person. You remember when Trump had been defeated by Biden, they asked the state house controller whether Trump would leave. And the man, because Trump had vowed that he would not go anywhere, that he was not going anywhere, whether they win. In fact, he said the election has been rigged, I'm not going anywhere. But they asked the state controller that, will Trump really leave the state house? And the state controller just answered that, just wait for that day. Trump will surely leave. And he left. If Trump was in Uganda or Sudan, or he'd be there. So a president is a big thing in Africa. So for that purpose, I want also to answer the question you asked about ideology.
Very quickly.
You know, ideology does not come from just people wishing. The ideology is a well-thought process that comes. What is the ideology for Uganda, for instance, if you asked yourself, what is the ideology for Uganda? What can you sell out as an ideology for Uganda? Uganda is a survival state where people are here just to survive. So including the president is surviving. But when you look at the United States, they have an ideology of controlling the world and making sure that they are the ones in charge. And they invest there. They make sure that they do it. Although, for those who studied the history, you remember Britain. Britain used to be the most powerful country in the world. Empire. And it reached a time it thought it can exist without other people. And it collapsed. So even the US may do so. So me, I want to believe that ideology can be something of the future. Because right now people are struggling to survive, to get what to eat. People are now wondering. In fact, if you go to homes and you do interview of people, they are worried. They're asking, how many days are remaining for children to come back home? Because they know when they come back home, they have to eat. You need school fees. So that's what they are thinking about. You don't tell them about ideology. They want something to eat. They are surviving. It's like telling these dogs in the market which walk, these roaming dogs, that you need to vaccinate them. Vaccinate them when they are not sure of where to sleep or where to eat. So you don't talk about ideology in third world countries. In third world countries, the issue is survival. A group wants to go there and control that survival. Because some of you may think that NRM is very popular. People like NRM. NRM is only popular because they are the ones serving now. They are the ones serving the food. And tomorrow, if NRM left government, I swear, like KANU. Do you know that KANU does not have an MP in Kenya?
Right now.
Right now. But KANU used to look like a party for God.
Honorable Semoju, the resignation I hear from Dr. Ojambo when it comes to how things can run simply tells me that you have a whole lot of work to do. First and foremost, to make PFF marketable beyond the individual need to come to power or beat, for example, the team at Najana Nkumbi at the power dynamics. What is it that forms the nervous system of the PFF? What is the PFF nervous system?
One time I met political attaches at the EU embassies. And they told me, your opposition, you're only interested in removing Museveni. And asked them whether that in itself was a crime. Because you see, in Uganda, and I think in many African countries, the competition is still a human resource competition, who can manage the country better. It is not competition
of ideas,
the policies. It is a competition of human resource. I covered the elections as a journalist. Even people who turn up for rallies, sometimes they will never even listen to the candidate what he's saying, because
they are waiting for the.
Yes, when I was an observer, I assigned the journalists, and I said at every rally, ask people, what has the candidate said? They said you get like 30 people. And we were profiling them. My name is M. Ibrahim. And what the candidate said, I didn't hear, but I like him. He's at a rally for 2 hours. So the trouble in Uganda is still a trouble of human resource, not a trouble of policies. Many of the policies, some of the policies that Museveni keeps proclaiming are universal. They are proposed by UN and the international community. Free education, free health care, free this and that. And our competition is to implement those policies better. In fact, one time we are being compared to Rwanda, that Rwanda didn't have to hire people to write policies. They just take the one of Uganda and implement them better. And even Museveni, who, because in every meeting we speak about ideology. One time he was in Buvuma, he's a former MP, Egunyi. He was meeting younger MPs. He spoke, and Egunyi asked him, but sir, what my people want, issues of butter and bread. So from all what you have said, tell me one thing that will change their lives. Then he was angry, he went back to history of man, African. We are not an audience for that yet. And these policies, if you asked me, and even within PFL, people ask me, what is our policy? See, policies are easy to draft. If I sat on a computer for 2 hours, I will tell you we are this policy, even if you are not for it. So in Uganda, I want to focus first on the human resource. Once we manage our country better, in the constituency, I usually give the example of J.C. Muyingo. He came from Nagarama to Namugongo. At the time he came to become the headmaster of Namugongo, they were getting 2, 3 4 first grades. He didn't change children, he didn't change teachers, he didn't build structures, but he managed the school better until he left. What Uganda needs now is not a shift in the policy. That Museveni says we are agro-processing, and for me I will say no, we are mineral this. It's just a joke. We just need a pair of genuine, legitimate human resource to manage the country better, and then in the future we'll decide whether we want to do this in the region and so on and so forth.
All right, Sarah Abidete, please wrap this up for us so we can link up to Stephen Mbide to update us on what's on the ground.
Yeah, I think I won't differ much with the Honorable Semuju. What Ugandans need. One, can they, you know, in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, how many people can attain the basic needs of food, shelter, quality health care, quality education, or what the Singapore people called social harmony? Can we first achieve social harmony in the country? Everybody can go to school, everybody can go to hospital, everybody can survive. Whatever they are doing is paying them. Can we then have infrastructure that enables people to excel in whatever they are doing? If you are doing business, can you have a better tax regime? Can you have proper roads? Can you? Yesterday, one person was asking me in office, how could the government open up the whole of Kampala, the traffic jam in Kampala? Even on the northern bypass, you miss 3 hours of idle time lost in traffic. Kenya and Nairobi has solved that question. Can we have a leadership that solves the infrastructure obstacles in the country so that we are able to move? And then after that, we shall abrogate the ideology, the policies, fundamental rights and freedoms, especially the economic rights of every Ugandan. Once we attain that, we shall be at take-off stage. The people who are telling us we are at take-off stage without attaining the basics, they are telling you lies.
Sarah Abidete, Executive Director, the Center for Constitutional Governance, many thanks. Many thanks to you too, Dr. Robert Ojambo, Head of History Department at Chambogo University, and you too, Honorable Semuju Nganda, MP for Kira Municipality and also spokesperson for PFF. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for your perspectives and insights in emboldening our understanding of the political landscape ahead of the 2026 general election. Now, talking about what is on the ground, Stephen Mbide, it is raining, I can see, and that means Kampala's roads could be in states that, well, we